you're about to see my boy Bobby Kennedy just take everyone to the frickin' woodshed. He is in power now. Good for him. He's actually the HHS secretary, which means he's over Health and Human Services, which means he's over a bunch of different agencies, one of which is the CDC, which I did not realize. This man wrote the book titled The Real Anthony Fauci, where he claims that Fauci, among other things, did gain of function research, had a big role in the AIDS epidemic, and really did some shady stuff. I never read the book. I've just heard him kind of talk about different points about it. You're about to watch Bobby lay out what he wants to do for America, what his plan is, and what his mandate is from Trump for that. And it is one of the greatest speeches I have ever seen in my entire life. The speech happened yesterday, February 18th, 2025. Let's take a look.
And being right or being vindicated. We can start right now. Last Thursday, President Trump signed an executive order to establish the MAHA Commission to study what has caused the precipitous decline in American health over the past 2 generations. So we will convene representatives of all viewpoints to study the causes for the drastic rise in chronic disease. Some of the possible factors we will investigate were formerly taboo or insufficiently scrutinized. The childhood vaccine schedule, electromagnetic radiation, glyphosate, other pesticides, ultra-processed foods, artificial food additives, SSRI and other psychiatric drugs, PFAs, PFOAs, microplastics. Nothing is going to be off limits. Whatever belief or suspicion I have expressed in the past, I'm willing to subject them all to the scrutiny of unbiased science. That is going to be our template, unbiased science. That's something that will make us all proud of this agency and of our role in restoring American health. Let's commission research that will satisfy all the stakeholders once and for all. Let's use protocols that we all agree on in advance and not alter the outcomes of the studies when they're halfway through and that they look inconvenient. Let's all depoliticize these issues and reestablish a common ground for action and renew the search for existential truth with no political impediments and no preconceptions. Finally, I want to ask you to think about an even larger challenge to this agency. If we're really going to end the chronic disease epidemic, we need to recognize the connection between the physical decrepitude that now beleaguers our citizenry and the pervasive spiritual malaise that has left so many young people feeling alienated, dispossessed, disconnected, purposeless, and hopeless. Spiritual and physical maladies thrive on one another. They feed on one another. Our overall wellness must begin with a spiritual question. How do we relate to ourselves, to each other, to our communities, and to the planet? Vested interests in malignant political actors profit and flourish when we are atomized and fragmented, and uncertain when we can be easily propagandized, when we live in fear and helplessness and victimization. These forces prefer to have us in terror and anxiety, which disable our capacity for critical thinking and make us more compliant and more credulous. They want us hiding from ourselves to avoid our own shadows and dulling our pain and loneliness through sedation and distraction. Yet inside of us, we know that love and self-knowledge are the only true paths to good health. Here at HHS, we need to take on the task of guiding our country and the world to question, towards skepticism, towards engagement, to discover our own paths to living our fullest lives, unleashing the potential in every one of us to make good personal choices that allow us to nourish, to heal, and to develop ourselves. Only this path will make us effective citizens in a democracy. This is decidedly the American identity that we want for our children and their children. Through our own example of dedication and integrity, we can inspire our country on the mission toward well-being and toward achieving our historic mission as an exemplary nation. The goals that I have for HHS, the goals of transparency, of informed choice, of integrity, of efficiency, are possible only with your help. This task before us is historic, to reverse a trend of worsening health that goes back 60 years. And I know that we can do it. I know a higher standard of health is possible. I know that because I remember a time that our country was the healthiest and most robust country on earth. With your help and commitment, we can go back to that time. We can have that again. Now let's get to work, and thank you all very much.
So, as you can see, that clip was just incredible. So good. He calls out glyphosate and the children's vaccine schedule was the first thing he said. And I don't even know. I need to go back and watch it again. This is my third time watching this. And it's hard to understand him. The subtitles help. And I pick up things each time I watch it. Um, he he addressed the underlying issue of addiction and poor health and what causes people to overeat in the first place and indulge in these crappy foods that we should look to possibly ban. What's the root cause, right? The psychology of people was pushing them towards these things. And he talked about that. No one talks about that. Nobody ever talks about that. Certainly not in the freaking medical industry. They never talk about things like that. It's always just here's a pill to take care of your symptoms, and that's all it is. It treats your symptoms. And then it'll give you other symptoms, and then you need a pill for those. And he brought up identifying the root causes of these issues and addressing those. And it's a spiritual issue. And I think that's a very big deal. Um, just to touch on what I mentioned earlier about Fauci. So I had Grok 3. First time I used it, actually, was tonight. It was just released yesterday. Um, I asked it to summarize for an 8-year-old the real Anthony Fauci book that RFK wrote, which, by the way, he's not been sued for libel or at all from Fauci. So that tells you something right there. I'm going to read this to you. It's a paragraph long. All right, here's the summary for an 8-year-old. Imagine a book that says a big doctor named Anthony Fauci, who helps make medicines, didn't always do the best job. The writer, Robert Kennedy Jr., thinks Fauci cared more about making money with his friends, like a guy named Bill Gates, than helping people feel better. The book says Fauci picked expensive medicines over cheap ones for sick people, like those with AIDS or COVID, and didn't let other ideas be heard. It's like saying he was the boss of a club that only listened to his rules, even if they weren't fair. Some people like the book, but others say it's not true and makes up stories. Does that make sense? So there you go. There you go. So he enriched his friends by only approving certain medicines, um, things that had a generic um, classification, those were not pushed, those were avoided. So ivermectin would be one of those. Um, Probably hydrochloroquine. I don't know. I know both of them treat COVID very well. Um, so yeah, picked expensive medicines over cheap ones for sick people, like those with AIDS or COVID. So this guy is now over the frickin' CDC, Fauci, and everyone. I think Fauci's out to pasture now. I don't know. I've not heard anything out of the guy in over a year. I think he retired, if I recall. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I never thought this day would come. I am cautiously optimistic about this whole thing. I feel really good about the Bobby thing. Um, and the speech was just incredible. It's one of the greatest speeches I've ever seen, and I hope you agree. One last thing before we go, let's just go back and let's see the ones he listed out here. Here we go. Perfect. Yeah, pesticides, ultra processed foods,
Investigate were formally taboo or insufficiently scrutinized. A childhood vaccine schedule, electromagnetic radiation, glyphosate, other pesticides, ultra-processed foods, artificial food additives, SSRI and other psychiatric drugs, PFAs, PFOAs, microplastics. Nothing is going to be off limits. Whatever belief or suspicion I have expressed in the past, I'm willing to subject them all to the scrutiny of unbiased science. That is going to be our template, unbiased science. That's something that will make us all proud of this agency and of our role in restoring American health. Let's commission research that will satisfy all the stakeholders.
Well, I pray for this Kennedy that he doesn't end up like his dad or his uncle, taking on big conglomerates like Tyson and Monsanto, and I mean just the big industry, ag industry specifically, is going to be a challenge. So, bravo to you, Kennedy. You're showing a ton of courage, just like Trump. And I'm looking forward to what you do in office. Take care.